Hello and welcome to The Menu, Monocle Radio's food and drink programme. I'm your host, Chiara Rimella. Coming up, we meet the publican turned founder of a Spanish fish bar in North London.
I think we had a joke, before we opened, how funny it would be to have the best burger and chips in London in, two different places. But I didn't think they'd get as much attention as they did.
Plus, we sample the dried fruit and nuts that are integral to Afghan heritage.
That was kind of the impetus for us to be like, okay, one of the best palates in the world agrees with us that these are unique products that deserve a broader audience. So that was a good boost of confidence.
All that here on The Menu on Monocle Radio. When you've already got a success under your belt, what does the next step look like? The temptation for many restaurateurs is to repeat a winning formula, but Ed McIlory had something different in mind. Though his pub, the Plimsoll, which he runs with co-owner Jamie Allen, is enjoying a roaring trade, no doubt helped by the fact their burger is routinely named as the best in London, the pair decided to take over another classic British culinary institution, the fish and chip shop. Inspired by the unfussy tapas spots of Barcelona and northern Spain, the two have opened Tollington's Fish Bar in London's Finsbury Park, putting an Iberian spin on proceedings. But other than the food being served from the steel worktop, the Spanish influence is felt in their no-nonsense, casual, almost devil-may-care approach to dining. That's not to say, however, that every detail hasn't been considered. From their staple chips bravas to fish a la plancha, the cooking is impeccable, but relaxed at the same time. I sat down with Ed in the studio to hear more. I started by asking him what version of Spanish food influenced them the most and whether there's any Britishness to their dishes too.
There's definitely Spanish nods there, There's real obvious parts of Spain in fried chistorra on bits of baguette with tomato, and chips bravas is the perfect sort of mashup of the two, really. But I suppose the part of Spain and Barcelona, northern Spain, everywhere has their sort of cultural and gastronomic identities in Spain, but it's more that sort of feel of the place that I'm trying to not recreate but sort of capture in London a little bit. I think the idea of just being able to turn up somewhere and grab a spot wherever you can find one and eat something that's been cooked well, hopefully, and is fresh from the sea or farm. In terms of sort of the flavour in the food, we're cooking, a lot of the seafood's just being cooked on a flat top plancha, It's how most of the seafood's cooked in Spain, and it's where a lot of the flavour comes from, plus the oil and salt, So I suppose in a lot of the fish cookery, it's much less sort of French things that we've done in the past, and it's more rough and ready, very hot grill, fresh fish, lots of salt. And that's where the real flavour, I think, will come through. It's definitely recognisable to me. And I think you see people walk in as well, especially if you're cooking prawns on a plancha, They walk in and it's that smell of Spain straight away. It's cool.
Well, I feel like Spain is so much in the food as it is in the atmosphere, which is weird considering that you have taken over a 1970s chippy, essentially. But what is it, I suppose, that attracted you to those Spanish spaces? I've heard you describe it before as no nonsense. Yeah. What's no nonsense about those spaces, and what attracted you to that specific kind of atmosphere? And do you think that that's missing elsewhere in the world?
I'm attracted to it because I enjoy it, obviously, first and foremost. I just spent a lot of time propped at bars, even when not drinking, when I was a kid with my dad, just sat eating little fried chicken wings in Spain, and just thinking it was the best thing ever. But I suppose a little bit for me is, personally, I'm not a big forward planner or booker. And a lot of the places that I want to eat at are booked up all the time. And I feel like it's perhaps a little bit of a hangover from the sort of COVID times, sorry to say it. But, this booking thing in London where it never used to be this sort of bookings focus and you had to have your time and place and you knew where you were going and you knew what you were going to eat. It used to be a few more casual spots, and I think with everything that we'll do, there'll always be that sort of element of neighbourhood and community to them. So these places where there are large portions of the space that aren't booked up by people travelling from elsewhere to eat, it's about people that live around the corner being able to pop in, even if it's just for a quick bite and a beer before they go on elsewhere. It's just to slightly relax the options on sort of eating out and a night out, you know. You don't have to book and go and have a sit-down meal and feel like you might have to dress in something slightly smarter than usual, you know, for people to like drop in on their way home from work because they're a bit peckish.
I think you've touched on two very important things in the London dining scene at the moment, and I'm sure also beyond. This idea of the no booking, I think, is really interesting because in theory, it's supposed to be about less planning. But I've spoken to people who've tried to get a table at Tollington's and they've told me, you know, you have to get there at 6 p.m. and then join the queue because ultimately there's something to a restaurant that doesn't take bookings nowadays that's so extraordinary that it does almost add to the factor. So where do you feel on that? Do you think that the restaurant being no bookings makes it more accessible, or in a way, have we gotten to this place where having no bookings is actually the ultimate kind of inaccessibility type of scenario?
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because I suppose it depends who you're trying to be accessible to. Because obviously accessibility is a broad thing, but at the moment, yeah, we've just opened, and there's often at 6 o'clock there is a bit of a queue, which is, you know, I've worked in other people's restaurants where there's been a queue, and as a cook is a big motivator, you know, like you kind of are aware of how quickly you're going to be busy, and it's lovely. It's a nice thing to have. I don't think it will stay like that forever. I think it will obviously sort of ease off as everywhere that with the queue in the beginning does, and then it will become a little bit more sort of like regular drop in.
But will it though? Because, I mean, your spots have been consistently like uber popular for years now. Like there is an unruliness to that is kind of, I feel, inbuilt in the stuff that you do. So do you think that nature is going to die down?
I don't know. It's this thing. It's like me personally, if I had a night off and I wanted to go out for dinner, because I'm not good at planning, and I just sort of will go out, and that's why I'm not often eating like the same place all of the time. But, you know, if I went somewhere and I was told, oh, you can come back in an hour and have some food, and there's a really good pub or a good wine bar over the road, or like, you know, somewhere I can just go and have a drink, like, I wouldn't mind too much, you know. And it's like, it's about trying to, hopefully, you know, if we do stay busy, like, it'd be lovely if people still wanted to keep coming in like 2-3 years' time, the same they do as the pub. But yeah, it's just, maybe we'll always just be a place where you don't plan to go there for some kind of occasion. You know, if you want to go somewhere for someone's birthday or whatever, like you go somewhere where you can book and it can be a bit special. But really, it's just like, it's a casual dining offer in like a neighbourhood area that, you know, it'd be lovely to stay busy because we need it to. But also, I think it will be like a sort of small shift towards people thinking about a restaurant maybe slightly differently, and like they put it in a different category to certain other restaurants they have, because I feel like people do, you know, especially in London now, we're still in the midst of this like renaissance of restaurants and foods, and people are trying to find out what their identity is within that, and restaurants get categorised. Like I even do it, you know, there's certain places where I know I'm going to go if I've got like an hour to myself and I'm hungry, you know. So yeah, we're just in this sort of working out phase of where we could go as a restaurant, you know. It's like, obviously as a business owner, I know if I just booked out the whole place, we'd be getting the same amount of revenue every single night. I'd know how much we were going to make, and it would be almost like the maximum of what the place could make. But I don't really want to do that, because it's sort of about like sticking to your guns a little bit and just saying like, no, we're doing the walk-ins thing for a reason. So
yeah, and it's also symbolic that you are inside a former fish and chip shop, right? Because that is the ultimate kind of great leveler, cheap neighbourhood spot. What does that mean to you? Because, you know, there's obviously a symbolism to occupying a space like that. How did you find it? Why did you choose it was the right thing for you? And how much of a responsibility to preserving some of its spirit did you feel?
Obviously, the idea for like a fish bar that's sort of like both a fish bar and also a place that sort of emulates this sort of Barcelona-esque feel, that idea I'd had for a while. And then this place just sort of, I was just always looking, you know, at what's out there. And then this place popped up, and it's just quite a funny comparison, I think, for me, between going into bars in Spain and having this sort of display of everything they have in front of you. You know, I grew up with that same thing, except it was battered sausage and saveloy in a brightly lit glass box, you know.
But same, really.
But same, you know. So there was that really like good sort of comparison between those two, which I found quite fun. Obviously, the place was called Tollington's Fish Bar and Restaurant, so I was like, it's already got a name. I hope I never have to name anywhere that I open, you know.
So far, so good.
Yeah, I know. It's been really handy. I mean, a lot of these sort of proper locals actually used to use the chippy, you know. A few of them have come in just to try the chips, like sauce on the side always, which I completely respect and understand. But, you know, they like the chips, so I've just got to get to a point where I can do them like fish and chips on a Friday. And I think like internally I'll be like morally happy.
Let's talk about the chips though, because they are kind of hallowed and much talked about. But how important was it for you to have the chips, and how did you get to that specific version of chips? Because it's doing lots of things at once. It's kind of, as you say, pleasing the locals, fried in, well, you tell us what they're fried in, but also like the specific sauce on the side. Well, not on the side, on top for those who are not purists. But how important was it for you to have this kind of, the chips be the star of this show as well?
I think we had a joke like before we opened how funny it would be to have the best burger and chips in London in like two different places. But I didn't think they'd get as much attention as they did. I think like we sort of played around with the idea of doing chips bravas for like a while, spoke about it on and off. So many different other kinds of potato dishes we could do. And then I think it was just like I just spent sort of 3 months in there doing the building, and was just the only thing that sort of was so constant throughout the whole thing was this huge gas chip range that we had. I think the fill level was sort of like 25, 30 litres of oil, which for comparison, a regular fryer that we had in the Plimsoll, you put like 4 or 5 litres of oil in it, you know? So these are huge, great big drums that are just like begging to be filled with chips. So I was like, oh, we have to do chips. Yeah. So honestly, I think it's, you know how it's always said like hand-cut chips and da-da-da. I've always been like, surely that can't make that much of a difference. But like everyone loves the chips, and they're, you know, we get 150 kilos of potatoes a week. We peel them by hand, we cut them by hand, we steam them, we blanch them, and then we fry them in beef fat. And yeah, they've gone down quite well.
Well, finally, it's so interesting and tough to take on the challenge of making a pub. And even though it's not the newest project on your books, I do want to talk about the Plimsoll, which is relentlessly popular. It's so hard, I think, to really put a finger on what makes a good pub. There are places that you go to around the city and you know you love, but why do you love them? What is that ineffable thing that makes a great pub, and what do you think has made the Plimsoll great and makes people love it?
I think that the thing that made the pub great, like if we go back to the very root of it, it's just like it was really good food and a good burger, you know. That was the thing. But I think, you know, something you've sort of mentioned a couple of times when we've been talking is like nostalgia. It's like the buzzword du jour, you know, like it's what everyone's sort of talking about at the moment. And I think people have always liked nostalgia. I think nostalgia just is another word for comfort, really, and it's just like that sort of warm embrace. Like, you know, you said you feel the warmth when you go into the Plimsoll. That's like nostalgia. It's like wood-panelled walls and like even just pints of Guinness in a tulip glass rather than the like slightly newer geometric glasses. You know, it's like all these little tiny things. And I think, especially nowadays, you know, I think it really appeals to people is this idea of going somewhere and feeling like it's not rapidly changing as the city is around people and the world is. And, you know, it's like going out to eat, it's just about feeling nice, you know. And if you go in somewhere that kind of harks you back to a simpler time, I do the inverted commas I'm aware that no one else can see, but yeah, it's that sort of thing that pubs especially can capture if you just sort of leave the bones of them as is, you know. A bit of carpet here and there wouldn't hurt, like a fruit machine in the corner, you know, all these things like that. Anyway, those are just, that's my own personal examples of like what I love in a pub, you know, and everyone's sort of slightly different, but I think everyone likes a bit of old.
That was Ed McIlory speaking to me at Midori House. This is the menu. Now it's time for the week's top food and drink headlines. Here is Monocle's Lily Austin.
A promising new method is being developed to improve the taste and aroma of wines tainted by wildfire smoke. scientists have reported positive test results for a process which extracts offending compounds known to cause smoke taint without also removing the desirable ones, as has previously been the case. Wildfires have doubled in frequency globally between 2003 and 2023 and have impacted several vineyard regions, such as California, Chile, and Portugal. Iconic plastic food container brand Tupperware has filed for bankruptcy. The US-based company, founded in 1946 by the chemist Earl Tupper, who patented the famous burping seal, is said to have been severely impacted by the macroeconomic environment and is now on the hunt for new owners to modernize the brand. The finalists of 2024's Best Pastel de Nata competition have been announced. The contenders were selected from an intensive 3-day qualifying round, where the jury conducted blind tastings and scored on characteristics such as flavour, filling, appearance, and touch of the dough. The final takes place in Oeiras, near Portugal's capital of Lisbon, on September 30th, and is open to the public. Those are the week's food and drink headlines. Now back to Chiara.
Thanks, Lily. You're listening to The Menu. Herati plums, kishmish raisins, gurbandi almonds. These wild-grown dried fruits and nuts are a staple of Afghanistan, and for the locals, their distinctive taste is a point of pride. In the past, these ingredients were a fundamental export of the country. In fact, in the 1970s, Afghanistan was renowned for being a world leader in the production of fruits and nuts. However, things started to take a turn when the country became mired in conflict and the economy soon collapsed. In 2015, though, the tide began to change. A small group of entrepreneurs, one from Afghanistan but now based abroad, alongside a couple of Americans, decided to form a company called Ziba, which gets these delicacies into the hands and mouths of people around the world. Now, after the tumultuous American pullout in 2021, Ziba is still running strong. Monocle contributor Marisa Mazria Katz sat down with two of the founders to understand what makes this produce so unique and just how transformative this operation is when daily life in Afghanistan is still precarious.
During one of Rafi Vartanian's first visits to Kabul, an Afghan family presented him with a spread of their famous dried fare.
With my Armenian background and a strong upbringing understanding that we had the best dried fruits and nuts available anywhere on the planet, I was a little skeptical, but as I tried them in front of my friend's parents, I think that there was a coy smile as I was clearly sort of converted without having to say too much else. I was truly sort of blown away. These were completely unique.
Tasting the fruits was also mesmerizing for Patrick Johnson, who, like Rafi, is American. Their paths crossed when he was in the country working for a manufacturing company.
I was served during business meetings a plate of dried fruits and nuts, and I was just independently blown away by the quality, and I just couldn't believe what I was eating.
The two of them eventually met, and as Patrick explains, they soon discovered they had the same newfound obsession.
One of the first things we talked about was how great these dried fruits and nuts are, and that was sort of the genesis of the idea.
The idea was to bring these wild-grown snacks to markets across America, as well as sell them online. A few years later, Rafi and Patrick and two other founders launched Ziba Foods. Ziba means beautiful in Dari and Pashto.
We loved the concept because the idea was there. This is a commodity. How do we move it? It's a logistics issue. It's a marketing issue, but it becomes more than that. How do we apply sort of what we've seen fail from a development context into this model and bake it in from the start? And I think that's where we probably most were excited about doing something really not just that hadn't happened before. This product's been traded in and out of Afghanistan for centuries. We're not trying to reinvent that wheel, but what hasn't happened, I think, is retaining that value in country. We didn't see any of that.
They source their products from around 12 different provinces. Some of their almonds come from Bal, which is a province between the Hindu Kush Mountains and the Amu Darya River. In Bamiyan, where over 2 decades ago the historic Buddhas were destroyed by the Taliban, they source apricots. Here's Patrick explaining how they were able to secure their products from farmers all across the country.
And the way we started to do that was to just get out into the central market called Mandawi in Kabul, which is sort of the aggregation point for a lot of these products that make their way to Kabul. This is the point of sale or the point of consignment also. We started there asking around saying, we want to be buying directly from farmers. We want to be going out and buying from the regions. And knowing that we probably couldn't do that from day one, we started to build relationships And so we started to move the product in bulk to India and just to get to know the traders. And more importantly, to send the message that the way we're going to do business is that you're going to bring product to us, to our factory, which is in Kabul, and we're going to pay you there for it in advance or upon delivery. As soon as it passes our quality control inspections, here's your cash. Getting that message out was extremely important because what it does over time is it not only builds trust between the farmers or the farmer representatives that sort of aggregate and bring product, but we become the first point of call for their crop because they know they're going to get paid in advance. And so it also maximizes quality because they're incentivized naturally to bring us the best of the best, which is what we've told them we need.
Nurturing these connections with Afghan farmers is critical to their operations.
In Afghanistan, it's all relationships. There are no contracts for supply, so they have to trust. And that takes years and years to build. And that's where we've been really successful. So they know roughly what we're going to need. That relies on us being able to go out to those villages, to spend the mornings, have breakfast with sort of the patriarch of the area, and really grow that relationship and maintain it.
The variety of fruits and nuts in Afghanistan is staggering. Take the almonds grown here. There are around 100 different kinds spread across various valleys throughout the country. Rafi tells me many of them taste and look nothing like their American counterparts.
Within that almond family, you sort of find some that are like soft shells like peanuts, that are almost taste roasted even in their raw form. Some are sweeter, their oil contents vary, the sugar contents vary. And as a result, how you use them, what you combine them with, all of these sort of permutations now are sort of possible. And some have this really sort of floral essence as you're eating them, and you're just like transported from that perspective.
These varied tastes got the attention of the chef de cuisine at New York's famed Michelin star restaurant, Daniel. He sent over a note to the Ziba team after tasting some of their almonds. Again, Patrick.
He's like, I don't know how you guys got these here. I don't know, where these came from, but I was so happy to receive them. I put them on the menu, and that was sort of the first, that was an incredible message to receive and also a stroke of luck.
It was just the kind of encouragement they needed.
That was kind of the impetus for us to be like, okay, one of the best palates in the world agrees with us that these are unique products that deserve a broader audience. So that was a good boost of confidence.
For California-based cookbook author and baker Sarah Owens, working with Ziba products has been eye-opening.
A lot of times when you're buying almonds, you don't get a choice of what variety of almond you get to use. And some of their varieties, I call them almond flavored almonds. They have like a lot of subtle nuance and delicate flavors to them that I think really stand out in a way that's just so special. And so even just making something as common, I think, in baked good as frangipani using their almonds, it was like a completely different thing. Or making almond cookies with their almonds. You don't have to even use like the same amount of almond extract that you normally would because you already have so much flavor there in the main ingredient.
But it wasn't just Ziba's almonds that caught Sarah's attention.
Tasting a Ziba pistachio, these teeny tiny, they call them baby pistachios, but they're wild. And they have these wild flavors. There's they say pine and camphor. I taste rosemary and all of these flavors that just blow my mind. And so when I use them, rather than using a lot of pistachios, to make a frangipani, for example, to use their pistachios, they become the star. They become the precious sort of item that you sprinkle them on top of something, and then you get this perfume of these different, super surprising flavors that I don't think a lot of people expect from nuts in general, but especially from a pistachio or from something that normally just kind of has some crunch and a little bit of flavor that's often augmented by an extract that is not actually even pistachio, it's usually almond. So, I think when our palates become used to an ingredient not really having character or really providing a lot of value to something, then you don't look for it. And then when you experience something differently, it becomes this beautiful surprise and this amazing celebration of something that's very unique and a reflection of the biodiversity of a place and the culture that has formed around that biodiversity.
Rafi explains it's not just the taste that defines Ziba. It's also the people they've got running the company on the ground in Afghanistan.
We knew it would be 100% Afghan. We have never had an expat on payroll in Afghanistan, nor will we ever. And not only that, we wanted to work with marginalized communities. In Afghanistan's case, certainly that's women. And our factory sort of now is still around, I think from day one to now, is hovered between 85 and 90% female, from plant management to accounting, marketing, all the way down to the factory floor.
Of the nearly 300 family-run farms supplying Ziba, many of the workers are women, and close to 200 work on prepping the nuts during every harvest. This commitment to its staff and Afghan farmers has also held steadfast even in the wake of America's dramatic pullout of the country in 2021.
Of course, those 4 or 5 days, we're there, panicked for our staff, panicked for sort of the future of the business, what's going to happen. You know, we have women in prominent positions in our business. They factor heavily in terms of our model. You know, it was 3 sort of very stressful days, but everyone went back to work on Saturdays on their own volition. Our general managers sort of asked around. Other businesses were getting back to work. There was nothing preventing women from being there. In fact, the reality was that because we're 100% female in our factory, no men are working alongside, women are covered, you know, because of food safety issues. So we weren't really sort of ruffling feathers. And because we were a tax-paying Afghan company for this whole period, our day-to-day didn't really change, and nor did our relationship with farmers, because in the rural areas, there wasn't really a lot of change.
Still, the country continues to face major hurdles. Afghanistan expert at the United States Institute of Peace, William Bird, tells me.
Now the situation is again facing downside scenarios because humanitarian aid, which only can be expected to be a temporary sort of band-aid solution of this, has been declining pretty steeply.
Yet, Ziba's operations could be a kind of model for what future economic investment in the country looks like.
Dried fruits and nuts are certainly one of the areas of potential in Afghanistan, given the climate and growing conditions, as well as the historical background.
Back to cookbook writer and baker Sarah Owens. She tells me that she taps into this history every time she works with their fruits and nuts.
My audience comes to me because they want to learn how to work with ingredients that have not been standardized. And then they're also very curious about why is it that those ingredients perform the way that they do. And then in explaining those attributes, you get to unfold this whole other story around the cultural history of an ingredient, a biodiverse region or an ecology that supports that ingredient.
Her engagement with the company remained steadfast, even as the situation on the ground rapidly changed. She kept asking herself what she could do to bolster the company's mission.
I think that part of the task for me and being sort of an ambassador of this company and the products that they sell is continuing to tell that story and to stay tapped into what's happening with Ziba. Ziba provided some hope within a really dark time of endangerment for a lot of people. I think that part of what I do is not just explain how to use an ingredient, but to really use that as a vehicle for continuing to tell a story that is constantly unfolding.
For Monocle, this is Marisa Mazria Katz.
Thank you, Marisa. And that's all for this edition of The Menu. Remember that we are back with a new episode again on Friday at 2000 London time. That's at midday in San Francisco. Also, don't forget to tune into our spin-off show, Food Neighbourhoods, for a tour of some of the world's tastiest destinations. I am Chiara Rimella. This programme was produced by Monica Lillis, and our sound engineers were Mariella Bevan, Finn Simons and Lily Austin. Thanks for listening, and until next week.
When it comes to voicing or acting on our opinions, why are some of us more confident than others? Financial Times readers think fearlessly because they're supported by bold and trusted journalism. Start reading today and bring well-informed ideas to the table, from the latest on the pleasures of food to sustainable farming and the future of wine. Start reading the Financial Times at ft.com.